Yep.
We are back. So, first of all, I want to start this this stream off by saying I am your host, Drew. And once again, as always, my co-host, Mike. Mike, how are you?
Just as handsome as ever. Excited yes. Though.
We have good reason to be.
We got the dub.
I was going to say One Pride is second in his fantasy football league, and we're thrilled for him. Good job, One Pride.
Yeah. He completely dominated too. So tell us the score, One Pride.
Oh, that would be fun.
He's gonna be like 132 to 119.
I hope it's like 132 to like 40.
7, yeah.
So, but no, in all seriousness, we are excited not only to wait for the score of One Pride's game, but also that we have to report on another score of a game, which is that the Lions beat the Washington Commanders 36-29. Is it week 13 already, Mike?
It feels like it.
Yeah. So week 13 being the week that we got our first win last season. So
yeah, it's nice that it happened so much faster this year.
Yeah, no kidding.
The waiting was a killer.
So we took some notes on the game, and we're gonna talk about that and what we saw and some of the ramifications of the game in a second. But there he is. Morning. He says, interesting. Okay. Where is he located?
I'm sort of here. That's why he says morning. He's only sort of here. Daughter's kind of having a moment. Yep, I feel
understandable. Yeah. So he made the effort.
Makes you feel any better, Funky? I've got two boys, 17 and 19. You're not going to get out of having moments for your kids for probably another 15, 18, at least 19 years. So
I'm curious how old the daughter might be. If it's like I'm 5 kind of a moment, it's different than like I'm a 14-year-old kind of a moment. Yeah. So, well, good to have you here, Funky, even if we are just in one of your ears. So that's good.
Right on.
But the thing that has struck me about the Lions, in the 2 games that they've played here, is that it seems to be much like a tale of 2 cities. It seems to be the tale of 2 halves. So in the Eagles game, they came out flat. And then the second half, they kind of rallied to pull back within a single score, right?
Yep.
And in the Washington game, they jumped all over them. 2-year-old. Yep.
2-year-old. Okay. Yep. Ooh, the terrible 2s. Mine went from terrible 2s to terrible 4s. So hopefully yours are a little shorter.
So
22-0
at half. And I'm like, this is over. And then Washington comes out and proceeds to make a game of it. And like, I was prepared to, because I was following the game on my phone. And then I went and watched it later that evening when NFL Plus put out the condensed game version. And I was expecting the second half to look quite bad, but I didn't feel that it looked bad.
Yeah.
I felt like Washington played better on both sides of the ball, and Detroit slowed down, but did not stop. I think, they put up 14 points in the second half. That proved to be the difference. I'm hoping, though, that we get a more consistent performance over the course of all 4 quarters this week in Minnesota.
Yeah, I think everything was just snowballing for us in the first. Everything we did just turned out okay.
Mm-hmm.
When there was a bad play, it wasn't backbreaking. We didn't have many bad plays, which is another great thing.
Right.
Then, when we come out, Hutch, I don't believe, played either the first 2 series. And those were the ones that they went down and scored on because apparently it was a Charlie horse. I was super freaking out, though. I thought he's playing on an injury and he's trying to power through it and just end up being hurt longer. Like, he better not do that. Turns out it was just a Charlie horse, I guess. So, I don't think he played either of those first 2 series. And they just kind of came back and walked on the field against us.
There is improvement, One Pride. We're gonna touch on those points, absolutely. So here's something I've noticed a little bit. Like we certainly saw in Hard Knocks the kind of physical condition that guys like Aiden Hutchinson, DeAndre Swift are in coming into training camp.
Mm-hmm.
And like this was also the second game in a row where Okudah had to come out because of cramping. And I'm wondering if he's prone to that, but like a Charlie horse is like what, a muscle that's bent the wrong way or knotted or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
And it's extremely painful, but I believe it's a muscular issue. And like between Okuda's cramping and the Charlie horse, and I think that one other player has gone down with cramps, in the game. Like, and it's not uncommon to see a player go down with cramps, but like when these guys are in such good shape, I'm curious, like, why cramping still seems to be an issue. Like, it doesn't. I mean, I would think that any NFL team would be like, we're on top of their hydration. Like, we have a diet plan, laid out for them.
Have a banana at halftime.
That kind of thing. Yeah. Like get some potassium in you. So like, you don't have this, like, I have no idea, but like, it's not that it's like Jeff Okuda came off the field and they threw like a 55-yard bomb or something and scored a touchdown, but like, he's played well so far this year, knock on wood. And like, I would prefer that he's out there feeling the best. Oh, it could be from surgery. Interesting. He did have a couple surgeries in his early 20s. So,
yeah.
But let's jump into some of these, some of the notes I took down here, Mike, and like, feel free to jump in with any comments or thoughts that you might have. Aiden Hutchinson did not have a sack against Philadelphia in week 1. They ran a ton of RPOs. He was double teamed, and they have the best line in football. And, but on Sunday, he had 3 sacks. And it was
the first half, which is it's a record for a rookie in an entire game, and he did it in a half.
Yeah. And so he went an effort or motor sack, I'll call it, I don't know, where he just kept trying to be a problem, kept trying to cause havoc like he does. And he eventually got to Wentz, and then he bull rushed their right tackle and then actually went high. And I mean, they might be better, but like they had all of their starters on the field and we didn't. So went high, and Wentz actually took like a half step back into where he was coming back to the play, and he just gobbled him up. Right. And then the one that really has me hopeful that they're going to be able to replicate over points in the season is that he came in on a stunt unblocked, where they overloaded one side of the line, and I think there was a miscommunication on who was to block whom, and he just comes off clean and gets Wentz then too. So excellent start for Hutch. Very happy for him. Was happy with the way that he got those sacks. And to be honest, he's probably not going to see a line as good as Philadelphia's the rest of the year. So I'm hopeful that he's going to have a positive impact in these games. Hopefully, like the one that he had against Washington would be fantastic. But like, hopefully if he could get
right, that's 17. Right. It's 17 sacks for a rookie. Is that too much to expect, Drew?
It is. It is so far. So like we were talking about some analytics before the podcast, above and below expected whatever ... whatever stat you want to put in there. And like I looked at like pass rushers drafted in the first round dating back like 5 or 6 years, back to when Joey Bosa got drafted, which I believe was back in 2017. And then tracked their sack totals in their rookie seasons to get like a baseline idea of like what are the elite pass rushers in the NFL doing right off the bat.
Yeah.
And there's like 3 guys in 5 years who have had 10 plus sacks as a rookie. Like it's just not a realistic goal.
Yeah.
So like, but if we were like, hey, 9, like I know people are putting like expectations on what Aiden should produce in order to judge whether or not he's quote unquote worthy of being the second overall pick. But I mean, like, this is a pretty good start to meeting those expectations, whether they were bullshit or not. So I'm pretty stoked with his performance. He has 3 sacks and 6 pressures through 2 weeks. So I'm pretty excited. Yeah. So, and then like we get Kirk Cousins next week, who doesn't have a fantastic line and like can move around in the pocket, but certainly not a Jalen Hurts style quarterback. So I'm hoping that he'll gobble Kirk Cousins up once or twice too.
Yeah, well, I think the way the Cousins played last night, Okuda and some of those guys might have a day.
Mm-hmm. He also had a pressure that caused an intentional grounding. So from Carson Wentz. So I thought like there have been a couple of narratives, let's call them, that say like sacks are the only thing that really matters from a defensive end. Like you're acquiring that player to generate sacks, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, a sack is a loss of a down and a loss of yardage, right? Well, an intentional grounding penalty is the same exact thing. So,
yep.
I mean, like, it doesn't go down as a sack, but like having an impact or quote unquote, like on a quote unquote splash play, like something like that, fantastic. You know, with the surprise retirement of John Penasini and, you know, the injuries to Onwuzurike and Pascal, like I still am looking for more help on the defensive line so that Aiden Hutchinson and whomever else we acquire don't necessarily have to say, well, if you're going to double team Hutch, you're going to have to live with X player they just acquired beating the snot out of you one-on-one the rest of the game. You know, like having a tag team partner for Hutch that's around his level, I think would be something the Lions would be interested in. So, and had two linemen waiting for him and instantly went and trying to disrupt it. Yeah. So in like this guy's 2 games in to his NFL career, I just can't wait. Like, I hate to say it, but like for this time next year, when he's gone through 17 games and an off-season training regimen and like been in like the film study room and like learning, because you know when you're in college, you probably play the same kinds of teams 3-4 times.
Yeah.
You know, but like he's gonna play the same teams 3 or 4 times in 2 years here. So like Christian Darrisaw's Minnesota's left tackle. Like if you can get the inside scoop on like how Christian Darrisaw plays, you know, like
right.
You know, that's the kind of thing that I'm excited for is him not being as a like baby deer when it comes to like playing in the NFL and like learning some of these tricks and figuring the game out just to an even higher level.
Yeah, it's just building that experience, building the study habits. He, you know, looks like a guy that just does it all. Like when it comes to he's a professional in every sense of the word. Where like you're gonna expect him in that film room. He'll probably be the first one in there. He's probably taking film home. He's, you know, the first one on the field and the last one off and all that kind of stuff. He seems to be that kind of guy. So that wouldn't surprise me if he really takes a big leap over these first half dozen games and then really starts coming on the second half.
One thing I think is interesting is like one of the things about him coming out of college that draft analysts highlighted was that like he is good against both the pass and the run, but so far it's from like the play breakdown and the alignment and like how he is playing. It looks like the Lions are basically saying, go get the quarterback, Aiden, like go get him, you know, like,
yeah.
And dedicating like their defensive tackles to trying to stop the run as opposed to like having Aiden play, like set the edge, so to speak. Right. So not that he can't, but like, I think they're saying like, let's see what you have straight out of a cannon right off in the beginning part of the year. So anyways, everyone knows I'm an Aiden Hutchinson fan. So let's move on. To another.
It's good when they justify it though, right?
It does a little bit. Yeah. So like, what will quote unquote justify it for me is if this team has more wins than last season, and he is producing at a level that like people can't effectively argue against. Like he doesn't have to be elite for me, but like he has to like contribute to them winning football games, which I think that he has so far. So
difference maker.
Yeah, exactly. The impact player they were hoping they were going to get. So let's talk about another impact player.
Yeah.
Aman Ra St. Brown, the sun god. This guy was taken, let's just remind everybody, in the 4th round of the draft. And he is playing easily like either a late 1st or a 2nd round pick. This guy is, over the last 7 games of last season and so far this year, has been almost uncoverable. He had 2 drops in the opener, but I don't believe he had a drop in against Washington. And
well, didn't he set a record for the most consecutive games by, I don't know, a rookie or something like that?
8 catches, 8+ catches and a touchdown or something weird like that. So I think about stats like that very similar to like when I hear a baseball stat that's like
on Wednesdays in the afternoon, if it's the wind blowing from the left.
Yeah, on Thursdays in May in a dome stadium facing a switch pitcher, he's 6 for 14 over 50 years. You know, like like those criteria are so unbelievably specific that to me it's effectively not relevant because you only are going to run into them a handful of times in a career. So like what the stat I think is trying to say is that he has been consistent.
Yeah.
You know, and so last season PFF put out a statistic that said of all of the pass catchers in the NFL who had caught like 50 something balls over the course of the season, he was 3rd when it came to like getting open against linebackers. So like last season, 1 out of every 4 routes that he ran was against a linebacker. And he ate them up, right? He abused them because he's quick, he's sure-handed, he's a good wide receiver. And so now, like, we're seeing him continue on with that streak. He's clearly the go-to receiver for Jared Goff. And One Pride has him on his fantasy team, so you know he's got to be a producer. Because One Pride, we're still waiting on that fantasy score, by the way, One Pride. So here we go. Mike has pulled up.
So this is Aman Ra St. Brown.
Yep.
Kind of see where his PFF ratings are in the different areas of the field.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're looking at outside left between the numbers and outside right and depth of target, like he's killing it downfield, and he's doing great even in short situations.
Yeah. So that first set, like between 0 and 10.
Yeah,
that's where I think he's
scrimmage. This is 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and then 20 plus.
I got you. So I think he's going to end up living in that 0 to 10 range. Yeah, your fantasy score. We want to know what your fantasy score. You said you dominated. We want to know by how much. Let's throw that thing up there, man. So I think he's going to be at his best when he's going to be able to be underneath, move the chains, sure-handed guy who's quick and hard to stay right with.
Yep.
I don't think that he's slow by any stretch, but I also think that that's not what he is, right? Like he is not just a burner. So like I'm very interested. Oh, there it is. I see what I said. 142.
Wow, yeah, that is domination.
66.
Well done.
Yeah. Woo. I think that when Jamison Williams comes back and is ready to go and be Jamison Williams again, the pairing of these two guys, one is elite underneath, one could be elite, at the next level of the field.
Yep.
Like I think that those two guys being as young as they are, having the skill sets that they have, is going to give whomever the quarterback of the Detroit Lions is a lot of options.
Yeah. Well, ASIC says, wonder what that graphic compares to Goff's graphic for the same thing. As it turns out, I think we had that, don't we, Drew?
We had something like it in Next Gen Stats.
Next Gen Stats. By the way, nextgenstats.nfl.com is pretty amazing.
They don't do defensive stuff.
Yeah, there wasn't much in the way of defensive stuff. That is true. Let me, I think it's under Game Center. And then if we go to Washington, Detroit, got some
Aman Ra got One Pride 39 points.
So
I'm assuming it's PPR One Pride.
I mean, it has to be. But so the stats for this game, Goff's longest air complete, distance was 33.9, which isn't. I mean, that's no joke. That's a decent heave. Aman Ra St. Brown went 21 miles an hour. He was one of the top 10 fastest in the league so far. These are individual plays. Charles Harris. So to answer A6, let's take a look at what Jared Goff did in those areas. He was really just a little under 2/3. He was
57%. Yep, so far for the year.
And it looks like his big thing is struggling on the left. He was 3 for 9 on attempts to the left. Off to the right, he was doing okay. So he was actually above average completion-wise, performance in that 10 to 20. Mm-hmm. And I think it's not surprising that it matches up well with what Aman Ra, right?
Right.
Shocker.
Yeah, so he's clearly targeting St. Brown. So, which is good, and this is what we said, right? Like we thought that by improving the team around Jared Goff would improve Jared Goff's numbers.
Yep.
And so thus far, that has held true.
Yep. In A6, if you put Aman Ra St. Brown on the bench, you earned that 39 points on the bench. That was just foolish. Foolish, I tell you. So those were some interesting ones. Do you want to talk a little about Swift? I can bring up some of the rushing info.
Yeah, let's talk about DeAndre Swift. So, like, DeAndre Swift had himself a game against Philadelphia, right? Had a good game, productive game against the Commanders. And, I don't care that if he doesn't rush for 100 yards. I care that he is dynamic and adds an element to the offense that is not easily replicated. And so in this game, he had another long run. He had a catch where he literally fell down and got up and scored. I haven't seen that in a long time.
That was this play here, we think.
Yeah.
The 22-yard reception. This was a incredible yards after the catch. So what they do is they take the expected yards after catch. Machine learning and AI, they do this for every single play. So the expected yards after the catch was 8. He ended up getting 21. So he was 13 yards over expected. And that was that 22-yard reception where he fell down. And they're like, well, he's not going to get much. And then he gets up and runs it in for the touchdown.
If you notice, 13 and 8 is just about 22. So, basically what they're saying is, they expected him to catch that ball, fall down, and be down, right? Right. Someone touched him or whatever. But, he got back up and ran instead. So that's fun. Good job, DeAndre.
Yeah.
And he's been, you and I were talking about this. We may have said this on last week's podcast as well. But, he looks so much stronger to me. He's running through arm tackles. They don't seem to be affecting him. I don't know if that's coaching. I don't know if that's a physical thing. But, he looks like a different player to me this season.
I think it's coaching. Deuce, I mean, if you remember in Hard Knocks, Deuce was all over him about, not giving up on plays and toughing it out and all that kind of stuff. So I think he's taking what Deuce Staley's, dishing out and just, he's eating it up.
Yep. So there were a couple of things that I was like, let's not do that anymore in this game. One of them was, I think it was the second drive. The Lions are up 7-0. They're inside the red zone. They go for it on 4th down and don't convert. I'm fine with analytics telling teams that, there are certain situations where they are not going for it enough on 4th down.
Right.
But when you're inside the red zone and can kick a chip shot field goal that will make the game a 2-possession game, I'm more on the side of whatever those numbers are.
Yeah.
Now, luckily, thank God, this is not the kind of situation that like, hey, the Lions lost the game by less than a score, you know, but I also think that the way that you win those games is let's kick a field goal that's a very high percentage play from that distance in that spot. Like, I understand touchdowns are better than field goals. I want touchdowns as much too, you know, but like, I do not want to turn the ball over in the red zone either. Like, I want those drives, those possessions to count for something. And it wasn't a situation that was like, well, we're down by 9 under 3 minutes in the game and we have to score a touchdown here or we're not going to be able to do it, you know? So,
Right.
So I did not like that play. And so far this season, like, Dan Campbell has called a play where I think that we are giving percentage points back to the opponent, the onside kick, and against Philadelphia, not going for a field goal in the red zone here in this game. Crimson's joining
Hey,
us.
welcome, Crimson.
Yeah.
We'll be back.
Goff's trade stock is
Great
going.
stock, yeah.
Absolutely it is. So I think that, like, he is still, like, just like some of these young players are developing, he is still developing as a head coach. And so, you know, Aaron Glenn is in his second season as a defensive coordinator, I think, or was he a DC in New Orleans? I can't remember, but
no, he was their they were their defensive backs coach.
Okay. And so, like, Ben Johnson is clearly in his first season as a play caller, and like they all have to grow into their roles as well. And I think this is a part of it. You know, Dan Campbell said after the Philadelphia game, like, why he decided to go for the onside kick. He said, I wanted the ball back, you know, and I'm like, neat. But like the chances to get an onside kick are like 14%. So, it was a safety. No Raymond return and no Aman Ra TD without that fourth down call. So, well, I mean, like, so that's just it, right? So, like, anytime you talk about any play going differently, like, you completely change what the circumstances are after that play would have been changed. Like, you can't know how the game's going to go if you go back in time and change something, right? Like, it's the butterfly effect or whatever.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm not saying that, like, we should have gone for it on fourth down and not gotten it so that we could have gotten a safety and then, you know, gotten the ball back off of that possession. What I'm saying is that you would never have thought to yourself, well, we're going to go for it here. They're going to turn the ball over. Now we're going to get a safety and then we'll score on the ensuing possession. Like, right. So, I think that you play for some of the percentages most of the time.
Yeah.
You know, and so, like, I'm thrilled that the Lions won the game by 9 points, and like these plays were not the difference in the deciding factor of those games. But you know, there is going to be a game probably this season where Detroit wins by less than a score or loses by less than a score, and what's going to happen is the fan base is going to go through that game and be like, this is one of those spots that you could have, you know, done this as opposed to that.
Yeah.
And maybe the game there's a different outcome, right? So, like,
but that's not fair.
I mean, it's never fair. It's hindsight being
right?
2020.
Well, yeah, but it's not just that, but like, we're expecting our coaches to coach like Andy Reid in their rookie year. You know what? Andy Reid didn't do crap his rookie year either. Like, he was learning how to be a head coach.
I'm not asking him to be Andy Reid.
No. I know. I'm just saying that you're actually one of them that's not. You're like, I understand he's going to make these mistakes. I understand he's going to learn. He's going to hone the experience calling for when do you do a fake punt or a fake field goal or a onside kick or go for it on 4th and 9 or whatever, that kind of stuff. Like, you're going to learn those things. But I think there's a lot of the fandom, especially the ones that are like, oh, Campbell's on the hot seat. I'm like, why? He's a year and a half into being a head coach, or not even a half. He's a year into being a real head coach.
Right.
And you're going to learn. We got to give a chance.
Yeah, I disagree with Anthony here in the chat. Like he says, the defense was getting a ton of pressure. Either you get a TD or turn it over, and they are backed way up against a line they can't handle. Sure, and it worked out. So like my point is, like, if they are in this situation 10 times over the course of the season,
that's the only safety they're getting out of those.
Right. Like if they turn the ball over on downs on the 10 or inside the 5 or whatever it was, like I am not going to sit here and say, well, the first time they did this season, they got a safety, and then they got the ball back and went down and scored again and made it, over a 2-possession game. Like that's not the expected result from that scenario. Right. So like I understand his reasoning for why to go for it. That's fine. Like he wants to put another touchdown on the board. The Lions offense, as we saw throughout this entire game, they're averaging 35 points a game or just over, like that's amazing. You should win the overwhelming majority of your games if you average 35 points a game over the course of a season, and they won this one. Great. But like what I'm saying is that 3 points is worth more than 2, and it's a higher percentage of getting those 3 points. And like the next time that Dan Campbell's in the situation, if this situation is repeated and they don't get a safety and the ball back right away, he's going to be like, Dan Campbell, don't do that. What are you doing? And like, I'm not for having that narrative. Like I think what Anthony's saying is probably exactly what was going through Dan Campbell's mind when he made the call to go for it on 4th down.
Yeah.
And so like if it had worked out and they had scored a touchdown, that'd be a hero call, right? But the problem with hero calls is you're either the hero or the villain, and I'm just saying, like, I want Detroit to not to put themselves in a position where they are going to be giving back percentage points on getting a win, here and there. So that's all.
Yeah. One other thing, while I got my screen shared here, I thought this was pretty cool. Remarkable rushes. This is basically rush yards versus expected rush yards. And then sorted by rush over expectation. And we've got 3 of the top 8. Aman Ra St. Brown had a 58-yard rush with an expectation of 10. Swift had a 50, actually 2 50s, one that was expected 5, one was expected 8. So like we had a couple really explosive plays by those 2 guys. And I think that's one of the things that really stood out, I thought, this last week, and week 1 and week 2 really are some explosive plays where difference makers did something that they were really good at that made a difference, right? And we were able to jump out to the big lead. We're able to weather the storm in the second half against Washington. And they came back and scored 14 points. And you're like, holy crap, now it's just a 1-score game. And we just came back and battled and drove right back down and scored a touchdown. Anything you can do, we can do better. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was, I was happy with that as well, clearly. And it seems like, the Lions, there's another stat that I saw that like the Lions are creating big plays with their running game, which is maybe the most difficult thing to do in football, 20 plus yard plays from your running game are extremely difficult in today's NFL. And so, my thinking is that that's great. And like, I'm glad that those things happen. Like those kinds of plays help lead to victories. Like, and so if they can keep making those happen, that's fantastic. I just would not rely on it.
Yeah.
So like, 50 yards is great, and I'm glad that he's had one per game. And like, and then of course, St. Brown had his end around that was wide open.
Yeah.
So I was excited about that, but like, are they going to be able to produce the same amount of points, move the balls effectively when they're not hitting these big plays, right? So But if it is just a thing about manufacturing it, then I think that they're in a real good scenario to pick up a bunch of wins this season, which would be great. So yeah, I understand his reasoning, Anthony. I'm not arguing against like the reason why he got to that decision. What I'm saying is that like the play that he called was a low percentage play in a portion of the field where you're expected to get points. And the offense in that possession did not. And so it worked out for them. So like you can justify his decision making after the fact. But during the game, I don't think that you could make that. I don't think it was a good idea.
So one of the things to think about, though, to take Anthony's aside a little bit here, is this was in the second half, right? After Washington started coming back?
No, this was like the second possession of the game.
Okay. For some reason, I was thinking it was later on. But one of the reasons why you would do something like that is to show your offense that you do have faith. Like if they're maybe struggling with their morale or like whatever, like when we had 4 straight 3-and-outs or whatever it was, and we start putting together a drive and you get down there, I think that's one of those times where you're like, okay, yeah, 3 points is better than, a potential 2 if we don't make it and get a safety. And it's definitely better than none if we don't kick it and then they just end up driving, right?
Right.
But it does something. Maybe that those are the kind of times that you get your team to go, hey, coach believes in us. We're gonna give it what we got, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like just.
I mean, sure. And if I'm writing a Disney movie, I mean, I think that's probably a really good part to put in the script. But like, if I'm trying to win an NFL game, I don't want to give up points in the red zone.
Yeah, but I think it's more than just Disney movie. I think like
it sounds a lot like a Disney movie.
Well, I mean, it does, but it also sounds like a lot of post-game press conferences from a lot of well-respected coaches where they're like, hey, I want to make sure my guys knew I believed in them and I thought they could do it. And it would be a big momentum thing. So this isn't like, this isn't something that he invented, when it comes to.
I'm not saying that he did, but like this is also a team that scored 71 points across 2 games.
Yep.
I mean, so like, I don't know where the belief in it needed to come from.
I'm just saying that there is a time for those kinds of things. It might not have been this particular time, but
that's my argument is that this was not one of them.
Yeah.
This was, let's get the points and be greedy about that shit and build a lead on this, mediocre Washington team and then bury their head, stand on their necks the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Like that's what I want to do. I mean, like, did it work out for them? Cool. And they certainly won the game by a greater point differential than what this series of plays was. Well, I guess not, right? Like 9 points, a touchdown and a safety, meant like, so, I don't think
I don't greedier than you were because he wanted all 7.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, and that's great. I mean, so like, I want them too, but like I think there's a time and a place to go for it and like trying to convert on 4th down. And I don't feel that this was one of those spots.
Yeah. It's too early in the game.
Correct. I mean, like there are other determining factors to that, like where you are on the field. Like if you're on your side of the field and like you're only going to net 15 or 20 yards on a punt, and it's like 4th and 6, 4th and 3 or something like that. Yeah. I don't mind as much because it's like, you didn't really have a chance to score points because you were too far away from like scoring range.
Yeah.
And,
like long for
you're in that no man's land of production.
Yeah.
So like, I don't mind it if you try and convert in that spot, but like you left points on the board in this one.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
So,
I agree with you. I'm just saying that there's definitely scenarios where you still go for it. It may not have been that scenario though.
And I will be happy to talk about those when the Lions are in them.
When they come up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
what other notes did you have?
I have lots of them. So where's TJ Hawkinson?
Oh, good Lord.
Right. I very little from him in 2 games now, 2 drops in this one. Not looking. So like, I thought that TJ Hawkinson, and maybe it's the routes that they're calling for him. I'm not certain, But like I thought that he would be getting 5-yard curl routes and like drags across the middle of the field, like the stuff that St. Brown is kind of doing.
Yeah.
And like, but they have him, like in the first game against Philly, they have him running like a up the seam, out, read the coverage, and then he turns up. Goff thinks he's going out. That was the pick six, off the tip pass or whatever. So it's like, is that what he should be doing, or should we try to be using his athleticism in a different way to highlight him? Because like, what's better than one security blanket in my experience is 2 security blankets, right? So like, I mean, I don't see any reason why he couldn't be producing at a level like 6, 7 catches for like 55 yards and like help move the chains and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, but like so far, he has been a complete non-factor in both of these games, and I'm wondering why and how it's fixable. So, like, where is TJ Hawkinson? Like, I'm on a where is TJ Hawkinson watch now for like this game against Minnesota. I did think that the interception in the end zone where Bobby Price kneeled and was clearly had given himself up, right? He intercepted the ball, he took a knee, and then he gets run over from behind by a defender. There's no need to do that. That should have been unnecessary roughness. In the same way that if a quarterback gives themselves up, he's now defenseless. So was Bobby Price, and they did not call it. Like maybe they thought the play was over or whatever, but it's still like you can get an unnecessary roughness penalty after the play's over. I see it happen all the time. So I thought that was a missed call that could have helped the Lions. That was he very well could be a detriment. So we're going to talk about that later. I thought Josh Reynolds had a great toe tap for his touchdown. Like that was ballerina-esque right there. I mean, he could, if he wants a career after football, he might want to consider professional dancing. That was amazing.
It was a little rough on the ball placement, a little high, a little deep, a little hard.
He's a tall dude, so
but I was really impressed that he hung on to that ball because you're concentrating on a couple different things. Number one, jumping at the right point, because it wasn't like just perfect on stride. It was like it was kind of away from him, right? It was kind of like over the shoulder ish.
Mm-hmm.
So the ball's coming fast. It was coming flat because I think he threw it late. And it was a little bit high. So he's concentrating on all that stuff while keeping his toes in.
Yeah.
That was a great catch.
Yeah. And if he's gonna have a job on the team, like this is what it's gonna need to be, because like his playing time is gonna be decreased when Williams comes back.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that he's out there producing, right? So that was good. I thought special teams looked great. I thought the coverages were good throughout most of the game. I was really excited with like the fundamental way that they went about producing on special teams. I thought that you're going to win the game in all 3 phases, right? And I thought that the Lions special teams outdueled Washington's. We dropped like 3 picks. Like there were 3 times where Wentz put a ball in the hands of a Detroit Lions player and they didn't catch it, and so like if they could catch the football, they'd be wide receivers, not defensive backs, for one.
Right.
But like they won the turnover battle in this game and they had fewer penalties. Like
on that special teams, I can't remember back-to-back games where we didn't have at least one holding or block in the back on those special teams. And we haven't had one all season, I don't think, let alone one. I'm happy last year and the year before. I'd be happy with just a single game without a special teams penalty. And we're on the ball.
Right. So, and then the last thing that I thought, and this might be, the chat might get mad at me, but like the last thing that I thought was good was that the offensive line still looks good. I mean, Stenberg had a rough start against the Eagles.
He was terrible.
And like they may not have graded out, like the guards may not have graded out well against the, by PFF standards or what have you. But like Skipper played a pretty solid game, and
practice squad.
Off the practice squad, and so he had a nice moment after the game where the team called out his performance. I thought that was great.
Yep.
But so let me just put it like this. We are down Vaitai, who I cannot figure out how to pronounce his first name. And a Pro Bowl rookie contract, Jonah Jackson. And the offensive line played like this without Frank Ragnow on it.
Yep.
So the 3 interior starters didn't play, and this is what the line looks like.
Yeah.
Do you have to pay Haloti Vaitai? Do you have to pay Vaitai $8 million a year? And like, are you gonna give Jonah Jackson a second contract? I mean, like, if like you've already invested in Ragnow, I mean, you're gonna have to make.
You got your middle and your two ends, right?
I mean, like, hasn't the last 2 weeks been like you can put relatively living, breathing, large humans in between these amazing players and basically do it, like.
I think one of the things that it shows me is Hank Fraley. Don't let him go. I mean, he is coaching those guys up.
Yeah. He was one of my favorite things about Hard Knocks. So, I mean, like when it comes to be March and I'm like, well, maybe we should draft another guard and let Vaitai go. And everyone's like, no, Vaitai, he's amazing. We love him. He throws chili cook-offs in Detroit suburbs, like in the summer or whatever. He's a great dude. And I'm going to be like, yeah, but like they blocked effectively without him. And you can save $8 million, on the cap. So, sorry. I mean, like I like these guys as people too. Like I like Dan Skipper, but I would cut Dan Skipper in an instant if it meant having another like decent, better than him starter on a rookie contract. I mean, sorry. So what about you, Mike? Any other news and notes on the game that you wanted to highlight?
Nothing. I mean, nothing in particular. You kind of hit all the highlights. I was really impressed with Hutch.
Mm-hmm.
I was really nervous when he was limping. I feel better now knowing it was just a Charlie horse.
Yeah, for sure.
Aman Ra St. Brown is, I would say right now, one of the top 5 receivers in the league.
I think the stats bear that out.
He's, like you mentioned before, basically uncoverable. He had, I think, 1 drop, in the first game, but like the dude just doesn't drop the ball.
He had 2 drops all of last season, which was basically like, and let's be fair, like the way that they used him in his rookie season was the first 10 games, they did not. And then in the last 7 games, they did. And like, he still managed like 90 catches, but he only had 2 drops all season. And he had 2 against Philly. I'm like, okay. But like, it seems like that was like, maybe that was week 1 jitters or like, we're going back into the season. He didn't have any against Washington, right? So like the expectation is that he is someone who is very sure-handed.
Yeah. So, those were my big things. I was really impressed with Swift, considering he was kind of hobbled with an injured ankle, and he still comes out and bangs out a 50-yarder, and he was catching balls. He was dependable.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you, I was not. I don't understand what's going on with Hawkinson.
I have an idea.
They look good. I don't know what's going on, like with some of our other. Like Will Harris had a very up and down game. Like half the time, I was watching with my son, and I'm like, he's like, "Who's that guy?" I'm like, "That's Will Harris. He's terrible."
He is terrible.
I'm like, "Hey, see the guy that got the touchdown? Did you notice what number was covering him? Yeah, that was Will Harris.
Yeah, it was Will Harris.
And yet he still comes back. He makes an interception, and he ends up being one of our highest graded corners. And I'm just like, it was such an up and down game.
Yeah.
I mean, if he keeps playing where he's going to be a high graded player, that's fine. But I was really surprised at the plays that he did that were really, really good. I'm like, wow, that surprised me.
Yeah, he had an interception. And
so right place, right time thing. That was,
absolutely
right.
But like PFF does not grade people highly because they have an interception. Otherwise, Trayvon Diggs would have been like a 101
right
point player last year, and that's just not who he is. But like they graded him, I think outside of Tracy Walker, the highest DB on the team this last week in Washington.
Yeah.
And which means that he was doing the job the way that he was supposed to be doing it. So if you can do that, the good plays and things will come along if you're on assignment where you're supposed to be and executing what your job is.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great, but I would still cut that dude first when any other player came back.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we do on this stream is we obviously look closely at analytics. We let data-driven decision making is kind of what we like to do. So, everybody has a contract watch kind of thing for that kind of thing, but
yeah,
we do things a little bit differently, and we care about, have they heard of second contract watch? Right? Do they know about second contract watch? So that's kind of the segment that I'd like to do as we kind of go through the season and identify the guys that are coming up on second contracts, or extensions. Your TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, Jeff Okuda, Oruwariye, like some of these guys that are coming into the last year or so of their contracts, and just keep an eye on them. Do we extend them? Do we extend to the 5th-year option? Do we re-sign them to a second contract? So I guess Hawkinson, that was the big one. Like, I was really high on him coming in. I was high enough where I think we should keep him.
Yeah, you were all about his potential.
There was a lot of potential there, right?
There still is.
There still is, yeah. It just better be tapped, not untapped. So I guess, what are your thoughts after the first two games?
This is pretty much who I thought he was. I mean, I didn't expect it to be this bad, but like over the course of his career thus far, and he's in season 4, I believe, right? He was a 2018 draft pick, and we're looking at his season grades, right? So the season grades here, the one that we want to look at is this first 1, 2, 3, 4.
So this is the current one. The receiving, this is overall offense grade. This is the receiving grade.
So a yellow grade is a replaceable player per PFF's grading system, right? So a green player is a starter, and then a blue player is basically either a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro level player.
Yep.
So in 2020, he was a second-year guy, right? He took a step forward, and he became
good starter.
If he scored a 75 all 4 years, I'd be like, let's second contract this guy. He's a legit starter in the NFL. Now, I may not want to pay him $15 million a year in order to do that. But like, since then, he has regressed, and he is on pace to regress again in his 4th season.
Yep.
And so this is the season. So I believe they picked up his option.
Yes, I believe they did.
Which I believe is bad for us because he made a Pro Bowl. So his option is worth the transition tag at his position group. So they're not getting a discount on his 5th-year option.
Yeah.
So is it great that he made a Pro Bowl? I don't know. They sure as hell haven't won many games.
Yeah.
So I don't give a shit about the Pro Bowl, So like,
not that year, it didn't matter.
Right. So like, it's a nice award for TJ, and I'm happy that he got it, except that like it costs
the Lions.
It costs the Lions more on their cap, right? So if he stays at the level that he has played at these first 2 games, I do not think that you can re-sign him at a contract that mirrors a top 5 at his position group in the NFL. So something in the ballpark of 12, 13, 14 million dollars a season. Cannot do it. Right. I would rather let him walk in free agency. Now, if he stays at this level and you can sign him for what he is making on his rookie deal, something like $9 or $10 million a year, I would have a conversation on whether or not we should re-sign him at that price. But if I was TJ Hawkinson and the Lions came back and said, hey, we're going to give you this 4 years, $40 million, $25 million guaranteed, something like that, I'd say I'm going to go take take my chances in free agency.
Right.
And if I was the Lions, I'm like, well, we wish you the best. And if you get a better deal, that's fine. But this is on the table if you want to take it.
Right.
And if some idiotic team like Jacksonville wants to pay him $14 million a year over 4 years, and pay him $56 million, then like, okay, like I'll take the whatever compensatory pick is that he will earn, because they drafted a backup tight end in James Mitchell, who's a rookie, who's coming off of an injury. And like, this is a year to develop him, not a year to see whether or not he has a future on the team. And they have Brock Wright, who played well, like he had one really nice catch, but he's in there to block primarily, and I think that he does his job. It's just there's no, there's nothing about what Brock Wright does that calls a lot of attention to Brock Wright, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, like, he is a backup, and he does that pretty well for what he's asked to do. So congratulations, Brock Wright. You get to stay on the football team, right? So that's his reward.
Yeah.
But like TJ Hawkinson was drafted 8th overall 4 years ago, and this is not good enough. I can get this production from almost anybody else out of a tight end. I can draft a replacement level player at tight end in the 3rd round of the draft.
Yeah.
Where was Isaiah Likely taken? He's playing wide receiver for Baltimore right now. He was a 4th round pick. They drafted like 3 tight ends this year. Like, I don't think that that's a great way to spend your 4th round picks. But if they got a starting wide receiver in the 4th round because he happened to be called a tight end, then congratulations, the Baltimore Ravens, right? Like, I would rather take a chance to get that guy than pay TJ Hawkinson.
Well, especially when you're looking at it, and he's our 7th highest graded receiving threat.
And he's like the 5th highest paid player on the team.
Yeah, and he's behind 3 halfbacks. Like, you
Right.
shouldn't be behind, running backs as a receiving threat. Now, granted, we got DJ Chark down here too. This is for game 2, because we're just specifically talking about this one. But like, Brock Wright's doing great. Amon Ra St. Brown. I mean, 90 is where you start getting into like super elite type of things.
90s are like, you need to pay attention to who this player is. Like,
yeah. So yeah, like those are great. So when we're looking at like second contracts, and we're looking at guys like Hawkinson right now, the trend over the first 2 games is this: he's not worth renewing a contract after his 5th year. We'll see what the next 15 games shows, right?
There's a lot of football left to play this year.
There's a lot. And then the things that I am really interested in, because we talked about how running back, it's not that it doesn't matter. Every team has to have them, but it's not where you want to spend your money.
Right.
But when we start looking at the run game, Swift was, he was hurt, but a little bit there, but like, he's been killing it.
He's been fantastic.
He had an 82.3 the first week, 87 on the run, 82.3 overall. Like, that's pretty solid.
He looks like a different player this year for whatever reason. If that's coaching, if that's time in the weight room, if that's the light bulb came on, if that's confidence, if that's whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
Like, if it's a little bit of everything, he looks like a different guy, right? Like, and so coming into this year, I had said, I'm not going to give DeAndre Swift a second contract. Time out. I'll give this DeAndre Swift a second contract.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to give him a crazy one. I don't want to give him $7 or $8 million a year. But if he would want to take, so he was a second round pick, and I think he's making like $2 million, maybe $3 million. No, he makes less than Jamal Williams. So he is making something like 2.1, 2.4 million.
2.3 this year, 2.7 next year.
Now, if you wanted to say, hey, DeAndre, you've clearly taken the training and applied it, and we're seeing the results of that on the field. His contract's going to be up at the end of next season. If he plays like this throughout this season and next season, I would say, we're willing to give you 4 years. What would 30 be? 6.5, something like that, a little more. 7, maybe. It'd be more than 7.
I would go up to between 8 and 10. 10 would be my limit. I don't think you'd take less than 8. I would probably do between 8 and 10. Just knowing that the new $100 billion media deal will be kicking in. Everybody's going to get raises. You just know it's going to happen just because that's the way that works. Where there's money, the teams will spend it, kind of thing. So
I want to touch on a point that A6 made just right now.
Yeah.
If Swift and the offense both continue working like they did the first 2 games, you pay that man. No, that's wrong. That's the wrong kind of thinking. Because what you're saying is that he is worth whatever it is you're going to pay him over the course of that entire contract. And you just don't know that he is going to continue to do it, right? So that's why investments are a risk. But like, even if the cap goes up, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to start paying players at positions of value that are weak, like running back, like linebacker, like offensive guard. I don't mean pay him some nonsense. Oh, okay. So like, right. But like what I'm saying, okay, so let me rephrase then. So like now that I have a better, clearer idea of what you were saying, and then I'm going to touch on the Rumble's point. If the 12 million that you put out in the chat just now is something akin to the percentage of cap that he would have made prior to the increase in the overall cap number, then I would agree with you. Where I would disagree with anybody is if you are going to pay a percentage of the cap to a position of not very much value, like running back, that's going to eat into your ability to pay other players at a different position of higher value.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to keep that percentage the same per the cap or whatever the cap bumps up to next season, which should be a pretty significant bump, then I'm on board. But like, I am not on board. Well, so restructures, Rumble, are not good. Restructures give you money in the short term, but you pay in the ass in the long term. So like, if you were to restructure Michael Brocker's contract, which they already did this season, I believe.
Yeah.
What you are basically doing is you are building in dead money into your cap into the future. And like, you should never anticipate that what you are paying on the team decreases.
Yeah.
Like you have to maintain some kind of equilibrium on your cap, right? Like you can't let
everything right. You should never have to restructure a contract.
Right, exactly. Right. So like so this year, just to get underneath the cap to meet the league rules and regulations, they had to restructure, not a great big one, but they had to restructure Decker and they had to restructure Brockers just so they could be under it. And they're only like $3 million under the cap.
Yeah.
Like, and so what they have done to get under is to build in dead money in a future season. Not a lot of it, but like between the two of them, it's like $7 million. And like, if you're going, this is what teams like Philly, like New Orleans, like Green Bay, like, even in some cases, the Rams do to get under the cap. Yeah. So like, when you hear the term restructure or void year, if you hear those terms, what you should immediately think to yourself is, what the Lions did was they took the bonus money that was due that player and they paid it to him not at the end of the season or over the course of the season. They turned it into a signing bonus and they wrote him a check. And they're like, hey, Taylor Decker, thank you for restructuring your contract. Here is a check for what your bonus would have been over the course of the season. You're getting all this up front now, which is a good deal for the players because they're getting their money immediately, right?
It's guaranteed at that point because they cash the check.
Because you can put it in the bank, right? And so if you get hurt, if you get blinked off the earth by aliens, whatever it is, like you have that money, right? So like, good job. It's a good thing for the players. But the negative for the team is, the pro for the team is that you get immediate cap relief in the short term. Yep. So you can abide by the league rules and regulations. But the negative is void year restructure means whatever you saved goes on to the end of the contract as dead money. So like, bring up Taylor Decker. And then make the screen bigger.
Taylor Decker.
Okay, so see that void year down there in like 2025, 3.9 million? That's straight up dead money. That cannot come off the books. That is Moses wrote it down on a tablet in stone for there forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm not harping at you, but what I'm saying, it's a Band-Aid. That's
It is
exactly
Band-Aid.
right. So like, that's a great analogy. So what you do is like when your cap year happens in 2025, and the cap will keep going up as the league makes more money, but like you immediately say, okay, in 2025 we have a cap of, let's say, $240 million. We're subtracting 3.9 right away for Taylor Decker's void year.
Yeah, even though he's not on the roster, potentially.
He could play for another team. He could retire from football. Who knows what he's doing? But you are paying Taylor Decker $3.9 million to not play football for you in 2025.
Yeah. So think about who is the baseball player that gets $1 million a year until like 2046?
Bobby Bonilla, who signed that fucking contract back in like 1999 and gets $1.2 million for like the next 50 years or some shit.
He essentially had a 40 void years at $1 million a year.
It's the best contract in sports history. Like the Mets call that Bobby Bonilla Day.
I know. It's great. But that's essentially what he did, right? He had 40 void years.
So this is like winning the lottery and taking like, so if you won $100 million, or like say you won $1 billion in the lottery, and you're like, you're going to give me $10 million a year for the rest of my life. That's what Bobby Bonilla did.
Yeah.
It's pretty smart.
Yep. Especially, I mean, a lot of the athletes don't end up with good financial advisors, and they end up broke at the end. And he's like, there's no way I'm going to be broke, because for the next 40 years, I'm getting at least $1 million.
You know, and I doubt he's just sitting at home either. He's probably on some like local baseball programming, calling games, or like teaching or coaching somewhere.
So one of the things, you know, with when we're talking about Swift and do we extend him, second contract, all that kind of stuff. The thing that we have to remember about running backs is the average lifespan, or the average
3 years.
That's the word I was looking for. Not lifespan. They don't just die.
Right.
The average career of a running back is 3 years.
Yeah.
Why? Because they get beat up, they get slowed down, injuries. So at that point,
and you can replace them.
And you can replace them. That's another big deal, you know, part of that. So like, if we're going to keep Swift after year 4 or 5 or whatever it is, we're already beyond the average lifespan, which means he's not going to keep getting better. More than likely, he's going to be at the plateau and probably starting to go down. So the question is, when you cut that check for $10 million, are you good knowing that next year is probably the best he's going to be, and he's just going to continue to get worse? That's something.
That's the risk, right? So I wonder if we will see. So like the NFL and the way that the cap is structured is more rigid than that of the NBA, but you do see some things like player empowerment in the NFL now where you didn't used to see it. And I think that they're learning from the NBA. And so the next thing that I think that the NFL is probably going to see that the NBA does now is like, for good players, I think you're going to see shorter durations of contracts, because if you are a player whose shelf life in the NFL may be short,
right,
I would rather have a 2-year deal than a 4-year deal, because if I kill it those 2 years, I can get back into unrestricted free agency. The cap has gone up twice. There's always some sucker out there that's willing to sign somebody, aka Jacksonville. And like you can get that next contract at a higher, I mean, like $8 million might not be a ton in the NFL, but it spends like $8 million when you're not in the NFL, you know? And so like, if I can get back, I would rather make 9.5 in year 3 as opposed to having 4 years of 8, you know? So like, I wonder if we will see, especially with players whose shelf life might be smaller in the NFL, go to like shorter, more incentive laden contracts to try and get that payoff while they can get that payoff.
Yeah, I think so as well. So one of the other contracts that we want to do on second contract watch is Okuda.
Yep.
So let's take a look at Jeff. Had a great week too.
Yep.
72 grade. His week 1 was also really good.
Yep.
I mean, it's 58 points. For some reason, I was thinking it's a little bit higher than that.
Well, because the stat that they threw out was Devonta Smith, 4 targets, no catches. Jeff Okuda covered him the entire time.
Yeah.
So it sounds awesome.
Right.
But this is the difference between a grade and a result.
Yeah. I do love seeing that Malcolm Rodriguez actually, even at the off-ball linebacker, had the best coverage grade of our entire defense. So let's take a look at Okuda's career.
Well, it's not really fair. Sure. So like, you want to be in premium stats. Yeah, you're there.
Okay, yeah. For whatever reason, I can't get this stupid thing at the bottom to go away.
It's all right, Mike.
I know, but it just makes me frustrated. But yeah, so 42, 53, 66. He continues to be higher graded. Now, granted, it was, not as many snaps.
Right.
Yeah,
so like his second season grade, we should not even consider, right? Like he effectively did not have a large enough sample size to evaluate him.
Yeah, Rodrigo A6, that was week 1's coverage grade for Rodrigo, is just week 1. But he's not meant to be in coverage. I mean,
well,
right? He's supposed to be stuffing the run and all that kind of stuff.
He is an off-ball linebacker, so yeah, he has to cover. Like that is a huge component of his job.
Well, I mean, like the underneath routes, but a lot of it is run coverage, right? Run stuffing and that kind of thing.
Yeah, 2 sides of the same coin, as far as I'm concerned. So like, so the PFF grade that I saw was that in his week 2 run support grade, he had the highest among linebackers, at least in his class, like his draft class, not necessarily in the NFL, but like Devin Lloyd, who once again the Jaguars traded up to acquire at the end of the first round, scored slightly lower than what Rodrigo did. And Rodrigo was taken, 200 picks later. I mean, like, when he's playing like the 28th pick in the draft, why you're not paying him like that? I mean, you're paying him nothing. Like that's the thing about St. Brown and Rodriguez that's highlighting some of these points that we've been trying to make over the course of the show is right, like he's playing at a starter level. Like you drafted a starter in round 6.
Yeah.
So if he maintains that or gets better, that is a home run. And like this is the reason why you don't do what Jacksonville did. You don't go out and you sign whatever his first name Aluaquan is to $15 million a year in free agency and burn your cap. You don't trade up and pay twice the price of the pick that you gave up twice as much in draft capital to move up to take a linebacker when you signed a dude in the offseason that does the same exact thing. And then in the 3rd round, you come back and you draft another guy. Like, you're going to play a 4-3? That's gross. Like, that's disgusting in the NFL anymore. Like, if you're not a nickel base to match up with their pass catchers, you're wrong. So instead of taking like Malcolm Rodriguez at the 28th pick, which so many fans wanted the Lions to do, you found a guy that can replicate that production, and you're going to pay him nothing for 4 years. You're going to pay him nothing. I mean, I can't tell you how big of a fan that makes me of Brad Holmes. Like, starting linebacker, starting wide receiver, they are effectively 1st or 2nd round picks based on their production and how they're playing. And you found them in round 4 and round 6. I don't give a fuck if Brad Holmes misses on a 2nd round draft pick every now and again. If he's finding a guy a year in the mid to late rounds, that is a starter.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, the bar is not very high to be a starter on the Detroit Lions during the rebuild, right? There's basically nothing in front of them.
Hitting on these, though, that bar continues to raise, right?
Right. So, like, now that you have found these guys and they are playing like this, like, once you put them on the field against NFL players who are not on their own teams,
right?
like, and they are playing at this level, that's the measuring stick. So, if you found a starter in round 4 and round 6, you get to miss on a second round pick every once in a while.
Right.
Because they don't all work out. Now, if he hits on those picks as well, so much the better. I'm thrilled.
Right.
But, every pick in every round,
it's not reasonable, right?
Right. Correct. Is not, that's a great word. We love using that word. Is not reasonable here. So
looking at Okudah, I mean, again, it's early. He's improving. He's improved from week 1 to week 2.
Yep.
Is overall.
But let's put some names to those scores, shall we? Like the first week was Devonta Smith, a first-round pick last year.
Yep.
And the second week was Terry McLaurin, who just signed a great big-ass contract extension in the offseason.
Yep, he's a top 10 paid wide receiver.
So, I mean, it's not like he's playing against scrubs, and he's playing – I mean, so the yellow score is slightly less than what you would want to see. You want a green or better, right?
Right.
But, like, it's right there, like he is playing not like the number 3 overall pick should play, but he is playing like a competent NFL starter. Knock on wood. Let's hope that he keeps A, doing it, and B, does not get hurt, right?
Yep.
So let's assume that he maintains this level of play and does not get hurt this season. If I am the Detroit Lions, I have a very difficult choice to make on whether I'm going to pick up his 5th-year option. Now, there's some pros and cons to this. He has not made a Pro Bowl. So the 5th-year option is less. It's the least amount of money that you could pay for a 5th-year option from his draft class. But
it doesn't show up on Over the Cap
because they haven't picked it up yet. So like what you would, they do have a 5th-year contract predictor somewhere on the site, Mike. 5th-year options. Hang on. Here it is. I've got it. So if he would have a basic 5th-year option, right? So there are no playtime or Pro Bowl or All Pro escalators in that option. So if they picked up his 5th-year option, it would be for $11.3 million. So the question that I would ask myself if I am Brad Holmes is an average starting cornerback in the NFL worth $11.3 million? Yeah, you found it.
And I think, the higher paid ones are double that.
So here's what yes, correct. Or approaching that number, right? Jalen Ramsey, Jair Alexander signed a contract extension in this offseason. Seems like there was one more guy that cashed in. Was it Marlon Humphrey or Marshawn Lattimore that signed an extension? I think it was Lattimore. So,
I'm not sure it was an extension as much as it was. I think it was a restructure. Because he was.
Well, a restructure doesn't add money to the deal, right? And I think then it was Marlon Humphrey, and he signed like nearly $100 million extension. So like, so here's what I would do if I was Brad Holmes. If Jeff Okudah plays this year and I have to pick up his option, I'm not re-signing Amani Ra. Because
that was one of the guys I was going to look at as well.
Yeah. So like, so Amani Ra was a 5th-round pick. He is improved from pretty humble grades. Look at you gaming the system over here.
Yeah.
So like he has, so like started off at a 71, great starter, 50, 59, 53 so far. Didn't play last week, right?
Yeah.
So,
and the coverage is replaceable.
Right. That's the point. So like if I've got Jeff and I invested the 3rd overall pick in him and he's being graded as a starter, and they may not use PFF grades to help them make that determination. Maybe it's eyes on the field. Maybe they have internal metrics. We don't know. But like, I do not want to pay both of those guys roughly the same amount of money to be my starters into the next 3 or 4 years.
Right.
I would pick one of them, Jeff, and go with him.
Yeah.
And cornerback and defensive back can be the next area this team invests in on the defensive side of the ball. They're really close on the offensive side of the ball. Like, to me, like, we did the chart where we gauged like when players would become unrestricted free agents earlier in the podcast, several episodes ago. And like, you know, backup running back, backup offensive line, backup quarterback, tight end potentially. They're drafting for depth pieces. But like, you don't draft for depth if you're the Detroit Lions in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd rounds. Like, you have to find starting caliber players. So like, where should the Lions invest their premium draft capital in this upcoming draft and the next draft and the next draft, where they can A, affect their salary cap, and B, add talent to deficient positions on this team? So like, tackle, no. You know, wide receiver, maybe. Edge rusher, I would say yes. Defensive tackle, yes.
So one of the things,
quarterback,
we're getting closer to the end of broadcast at the 90-minute mark. But I know you shared something with me I thought was super interesting that I know we wanted to kind of cover. So let me see if I can bring it over to our window here.
Before we get on that, A6 said something.
Yeah,
we should draft an OG next year. Yep. Here's the name I want you. Here's a name I want you to pay attention to. Andrew Voorhees, USC. All I'm gonna say.
Andrew Voorhees, USC, huh?
Yeah.
So we got here. Voorhees.
Yes. Hees.
There it is.
There he is.
All right, let's see what we got.
Now those numbers are high because all colleges make them high.
Played no weeks in this time frame. All right, so
try 2021.
Survey says weird. I wonder. Interesting.
That is. I know he played last year, so I mean, like, maybe they.
When I subscribe, do I have to subscribe to like college separately from football?
Hang on. No, we'll talk about something
else.
Yeah,
we'll come back to him later.
I'll check I'll check my subscription.
All right. So one of the things that we were talking about previously was the importance of a quarterback on a rookie contract.
Absolutely.
And why drafting a replacement for Goff, even if Goff is a serviceable starting quarterback, is important for a team. And I thought, and you sent me this, I'm like, this kind of explains everything that we're talking about in one graphic.
Mm-hmm.
It's talking about the Eagles taking advantage of that rookie contract window and then being able to really spend in other areas. And this is the column that matters. The NFL average for a quarterback contract is way the hell up here. Yep. They're spending this.
That's correct. So like, and I found Voorhees' stuff, by the way.
Oh, did you?
So like, well, I think about this shit, A6. I think about it all day long, every day. Yeah, I like Levis. He's good. I don't like him as much as I might like one or two other quarterbacks in this next year's class, but like, he has all the tools to be a good NFL QB. Yeah. I'm with you. There's only one player on Kentucky that's worth talking about. So, but like, to get back to Mike's point here, look what they spend on their offensive line. Look what they spend at pass rush. Look what they spend on wide receivers. Look what they spend on their corners. These are the positions that fucking matter, right?
Yeah.
And so the reason that they're able to spend that much above what the the cap allows you to do, or like what their salary cap allows them to do, is for two reasons. Number one, they push a shit ton of money down the road. That's number one. They play that game. They are swapping out the balances on their credit card, right? Like that is how they roll. That's how they do their books. And number two, they drafted a quarterback in the second round.
Yep.
And they drafted a dude who won the fucking Heisman Trophy, which I know is not an indicator of how well that he will play, but it certainly speaks to his like production in college and how good he played in college. He is athletic, he is dynamic, and like he is deficient as a thrower, but more than makes up with that for his ability to run. And like the fact that he is on the field annihilated the Detroit Lions in week 1.
Yep.
The fact that they RPO'd and took Hutchinson out of the passing attack mattered. The fact that they were able to run the ball effectively because Jalen Hurts could scramble and gain yards mattered.
If that was Carson Wentz in
right.
every single one of those situations, and it was Carson Wentz instead of Jalen Hurts, we win that game.
Right. That's the point. Right. Like if it wasn't Jalen Hurts specifically, even if he isn't a polished thrower, he still got the ball to A.J. Brown 10 times for 150 yards and a touchdown. He still moved the ball down the field. So, like, this is the reason. We pay every dollar that they pay Jalen Hurts, we pay Jared Goff $19.
Yeah, it's crazy.
He's 19 times more expensive than Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts outplayed him. And it's not because he's an amazing second-round talent that, like, fell because they found a gun in his car or he smokes weed or some shit. Just no one believed in Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
He transferred from Alabama and Tua took his job. Didn't do anything at Oklahoma that was like national title oriented or whatever.
Yeah.
And there were questions about whether or not he could actually play the position in the NFL. His height, his throwing ability, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? They're probably going to win the division with him at quarterback this year. So,
and the thing that I found really interesting was, I thought that that chart was super interesting.
Yeah, I gave you one for the Titans as well. Do you have that one?
I do, but I got one other thing here I wanted to mention. A couple of things that stood out to me, other than the quarterback, because that's obviously one.
Oh yeah,
safety.
Yeah,
not something they really cared much about.
Correct.
Linebacker,
right.
Not so much. Running back, not so much.
And the only reason that the tight end is high is because they re-signed Goddard.
Yeah.
After the season, like if you want Detroit's version on that chart to look like that, re-sign TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah. But I thought the really interesting thing was his first comment where he says, I think the next stage for a team like this is to continue to draft edge, wide receiver, and cornerback so that you have young, cheap guys to cycle in when the quarterback gets paid big money and your expensive veterans begin to decline.
Right.
It's all about that cycle, right?
It is a cycle. It is just like the water table, right? Like rain falls, goes into the ground, it ends up getting evaporated or whatever and goes back up in the sky. Whole fucking thing starts again, right? Hey, what's up, Brian? I'm glad you could stop by, dude. This guy actually hunted me down to get the link for the podcast, Mike. Like, so I'm thrilled that Brian's here.
Awesome.
But like, this is the point, right? So like you have Jalen Hurts on a rookie deal, right? Now you're able to take the money that he saves you and you invest that in other areas. So, and you have the team, quote unquote, the team is better than what Jalen Hurts is, right? Like they're helping him, right?
Yep.
So, but like if you re-sign Jalen Hurts, now those savings are gone and you have to find more money. So where do you find it? You draft the other important positions and get good players on rookie deals to make up the difference.
Yep. Well, that's what the Chiefs did, right?
Correct.
That's when they drafted Tyreek Hill and some of these other guys.
Right.
All of a sudden they had to pay Mahomes.
That's right.
They had some of these other guys that were young and cheap in order to make them do that or allow them.
So now Mahomes eats up a huge chunk of their cap.
As he should.
Correct. Right. As he should, because they hit a home run there.
Yep.
And so now what did they do? So like in this last class, they had a bunch of extra capital. They signed a pass rusher. They drafted a pass rusher in Karlaftis. They signed a cornerback in McDuffie.
Yep.
They drafted a wide receiver in Sky Moore.
Yep.
I mean, like this is what we're doing. Like we are not making this shit up. The NFL is doing this shit, and we are just observing it and saying it back to everyone else.
Right. Because
So, like,
they might not have seen it, right?
right. Because when he signed a 10-year contract, you knew that they were going to go through one or two of these cycles.
Yep.
And they started this year, and they had to give up an elite piece who's producing for Miami, right? Miami had this huge comeback against my Ravens on Sunday, and Tyreek Hill was an absolutely massive part of that.
Yep.
But they are paying him $30 million a year to do that.
Yep.
And the Chiefs are not. And the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, and the Dolphins have Tua Tagovailoa.
Well, and the Chiefs basically replaced him with Sky Moore.
Correct.
1/30th the cost. Now, granted,
Correct.
Sky Moore is not at the level of Tyreek Hill,
Right.
but is he 1/30th?
So, like,
higher, like he's a much bigger portion of that. So, yeah.
So, Brian, you're just a little late, dude. We already talked about Hawk, but you're 100% correct there in that assessment.
That's right. He can watch it on once it's recorded, video on demand for the win.
But yes, Brian, they would be better served to let in my opinion, to let Hawkinson walk and try and replace him with a third or fourth round talent. Yeah.
But there's 15 more games left. We'll see kind of what happens.
Maybe he proves us all wrong in the end.
Yeah. But the other two things that I want to kind of point out was the Bengals.
Yep.
And the Chargers are doing the exact same thing as
Correct.
what the Eagles are doing, right? The Bengals went out and they bought most of their team, right? Because they have Joe Burrow and they have Jamar Chase on rookie contracts.
Yep.
And they bought something like $300 million worth of players over the next couple years because they had this much room. They had so much room in their cap because they weren't putting it to Burrow. And by the time that these other contracts that they spent are done, Burrow will be getting that big contract. They'll be out, and over the last 3 years, they're replacing those people, right? They've got the cycle going. Chargers did the same thing. They went out and they spent big in free agency this year because Herbert's still on his rookie deal. They can do that right now, and they're gonna keep that cycle. They're gonna be good. Both those teams are gonna be good for the next 10 years.
Yep. So I have one last question for you.
For me. All right.
I don't know. If we want to save it for next week, we can save it for next week.
Right.
Do you want to talk about what Lamar Jackson said?
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, I think so. How can we not?
Okay. So I have what he said here. So I'm on fansided.com. And basically Lamar Jackson put out, and of course he's doing this to increase his leverage with Baltimore. I understand that. But the question was put to him if he is looking for a way out of Baltimore, he has said that if the Ravens and Jackson cannot come to a contract extension in the offseason and they franchise tag him, he has apparently said, and I don't believe, that he would not play on the tag.
Yeah.
So, and then the guy asked him, where would you want to go if they traded you? And he said, Detroit, Miami, Philly, right? So, let's take a look at what those teams are. Right? Philly has a great line. Detroit has a great line. And Miami invested in their offensive line this last offseason. Detroit has skill position players. Philly has skill position players. And Miami has skill position players. And they have improving young defenses.
And a coach that the players love to play for.
So, do you think Detroit is on this goddamn list if Dan Campbell wasn't the head coach of the Detroit Lions? I don't think so. No. I think that people are paying attention and okay, so he is certainly not available yet. Right? Really? But you and I were talking and I came up with a scenario that I think would be feasible for the Lions to consider. So just along with the LA Rams F them pick strategy.
Yep.
This would be that. This would be the Lions saying we're not rebuilding anymore. We are opening a Super Bowl window.
Yep.
So this is what I would say. If the following happens, he's not hurt during the season. He gets placed on the franchise tag after the season and they cannot reach a contract extension. If I was Brad Holmes, I would offer this. So you would have to be able to. So Lamar is in the same situation that Roquan Smith is. He does not have an agent. So the Ravens would have to grant another team permission to talk to him. There's no way they would do that.
Right.
You don't want to facilitate losing him unless he has made it obviously clear, like, I will no longer play for you.
Yep.
So he either hires an agent or the Ravens would have to give us permission to talk to him. But you're not trading for him unless you can get a contract extension. So you have to talk about that before the trade.
Right.
So this is what I would offer. 5 years, $275 million, 100% guaranteed.
5 years, how much?
$275. That's $55 million a year, completely guaranteed. So it is better than Deshaun Watson's contract.
Yeah, which is what he wanted.
Which is exactly what he wanted. So if you're not going to offer that, you're not going to get the deal. So I feel like I have to offer something like that. So this would make him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL until Joe Burrow signs his contract extension.
Yeah. And then Herbert.
And then Herbert's going to obliterate that, right? So I would say, Lamar, if we trade for you, we will sign you the minute that the trade goes through to a 5-year, $275 million contract, 100% guaranteed. And then to trade for him, if they will take Jared Goff, which I would, if I was the Detroit Lions, I would do what the Rams did.
Yep.
And say, we will give you additional draft compensation to take Jared Goff.
Yep.
Because we can't pay him on our books. We can't have him on our books. So if you trade him before June 1 of 2023, you will save $16.5 million on your cap. You'll eat $15 million, but you'll split the difference basically.
And you would essentially structure those 5 years such that your first year is $15 million less than the next one, right?
Pretty much. Like you would have, so like the way that the Browns did Deshaun Watson was he's going to count this year for $1 million on the cap.
Yeah.
And for the next 4 years, he's going to count for $46 million on their cap, right? So, like, you would have to structure his contract in a way that is acceptable to him and allow you enough cap flexibility to simply absorb him onto the team, right? So that could be a real challenge. The Lions are up against the cap. So this was the scenario that I came up with. If you're trading for him before the draft, I would give up our first round pick, the Rams first round pick, and the first round pick in next year's draft. So 2 picks in 23, 1 pick in 24.
And Goff.
Yep. And if they were insistent upon it, I would give up some mid-round draft pick compensation. That's where I would start to push back and say, listen, I need something to build around this as well. Right? Like, this is a great deal. Who are you bidding against?
Yeah.
And if they continue to push, because the Lions would still, you can trade picks 3 years out. You can't trade into the 4th year. So, like, the Lions could offer a 4th first-round pick, which would be unprecedented. So, I would try and get Jared Goff into the trade to get him off the roster, which makes absorbing Jackson's contract
no,
55 million.
It was 55 million.
Not 50. You're underselling it. I wanted to pay him 55 million because I think that's the number he's gonna demand. And so, like, and I'm gonna talk about why I'm gonna be willing to do this in a minute, right? But then I would basically say the starting package is Goff, 3 first rounders, some mid-round pick compensation, and depending on how hard the Ravens push, the 4th first rounder could be on the table, but then I'm not giving up additional draft capital.
Right.
Goff plus 4 first rounders is as much as I'm willing to go.
Yeah.
So, and to be honest, like what the Rams have taught us is that even if maybe it might even be better to give up the fourth first rounder because
earlier years, second or third or something.
Right, exactly. So like if it was the difference between 2 second-round picks and 1 first-round pick, I'd rather give up the additional first.
Right.
Because I can still get 2 starters at almost nothing.
Yeah.
Through 4 years of the contract, and that's what I need in order to absorb Lamar Jackson. Is starting caliber players at dirt rock bottom prices, and that's what a second-round pick is.
Yeah.
So I would probably trade the 4th first-round pick before giving up multiple mid-round picks. But we're not done yet. We still have to get Lamar's contract under the cap, right? So like I am letting Alex Anzalone go. I am letting Will Harris go. I am basically not re-signing players whose contracts are up this year. Josh Reynolds, I think, is in that space. Deshaun Elliott is in that space. A lot of the backups that we have on the roster right now are on that space. And I'm just nickel and diming. I'm basically saying, no, like we need to save $1.5 million here, $4 million there, $3 million here. Like Jamal Williams would be off the team. He makes $3 million this year. And I would be looking to replace those guys with the other draft capital that I have left after acquiring a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And like, if you go into the offseason and you have the guys that they have on the roster, and I think that most of this roster is re-signed. Like, go up to the top of this page, Mike, and click on 2023. 36. That's less than I thought. So, like, they would need to replace 17 guys. Yeah. But, like, but, like, if you cut him, you save 7.7, you know? And so, like, that's a chunk. Like, Brockers would be a chunk. You know, like, you know, the problem is you have guys
17 mil.
Yeah. You know, and like you would have to go through that list and you'd be like, the guys that are going to save you like $1 million here and $1 million there, you're going to have to let those guys walk. Julian Aquara, probably gone. Logan Stenberg, probably gone. Those guys.
It's not good anyway. So,
right. So, and like the Lions, even after this season, weren't done fixing their cap, right? And Jared Goff is a huge part of that because you're paying him $31 million this year, 30.5 next year.
Yeah, because we save Goff 20.5 million.
If you cut him, not if you trade him.
If we cut him. If we trade him, how does that work?
It's less. Well, see the little drop down arrow where it says cut pre-June 1? Trade that to trade post pre-June 1. So now it's that's if you trade him in 2023.
Yeah.
So like this would be okay. So like if the new league year started but before the draft, you could save an additional $4 million.
We trade him after June 1st, we'll save 25 million.
So the other way to do this then, but so then you don't have the draft capital. Right. You lose your 2 first rounders.
Yeah.
So then you could go to Baltimore and you could say, we'll trade you the 24, 25, and 26 first rounders. And then probably you'd have to back it up with mid-round draft capital, right?
Yeah.
And like, to be honest, Baltimore's offense is built around a mobile quarterback. Like you can't just insert Jared Goff and expect him to do well. So like that would be what I would try and do, but I would 100% do it because you put Lamar Jackson
20
behind this offensive line
28.
With this skill position, Jamison Williams, Amon Ra, St. Brown, wide receiver to be named, whatever, DJ Chark, whoever it is, DeAndre Swift, with genius level Ben Johnson, who everyone has been calling like Wunderkind or whatever for like the last 18 months. And you just invest every other resource into fixing the defense. Like if that is a team that cannot go and compete for a Super Bowl, I don't know what we are ever going to hope to expect to do.
Yeah. Well, just looking at those cuts pre-June 1, so we would get 20.6.
Those are trades.
Damn it. I did it again. Yeah.
Top option.
Yeah, so
20.6 for Jared.
Yeah, 20.6 for Jared.
Yep.
And then Vaitais, so that's 27, almost 28 million. Rockers, that's 38 million. It's 38 million. It's almost $40 million.
Right, between three guys, right?
Between three guys. And to be honest, with the cap going up,
yeah, that's going to give you a little wiggle room.
Actually, need to do much more than that, but we probably will, because we'd probably get rid of maybe like a Charles Harris.
You absolutely get rid of Charles Harris, like you know, and like. But this is also like, now can you re-sign Hawkinson? Can you re-sign
We're not paying $2 million for Gabinda.
First of all, there's no team needs a fullback on the roster. Like that's what Brock Wright does. Like you don't need him.
Yeah.
So whatever. But like you can't cut him this right now today and save money, so he's on the roster. So like but like he's one of the guys I think they'll cut, you know, even though they re-signed him to like a 1-and-1 or whatever the deal was. But like this is how you would get there.
Yeah.
And like I know that there are like a lot of like Jared Goff apologists who like, I don't know if they expect him to come to their birthday parties or whatever, but they're in the Lions fan base that think that he's just the best, most valuable quarterback in the NFL for whatever reason. But like, okay, A6, like you're losing credibility here. So like, just kidding. But like, yeah, Joe Flacco, congratulations on a very low probability win for the Jets. That was an amazing series of things that had to happen. Happy for that guy.
Was that he's still in the league at this
I could not believe that he was still playing in the NFL when I heard that he was starting this week. Yeah. So, but like, this is what it would take. So like, if he becomes available, if he is franchise tagged, that is what I would consider to be Lamar Jackson, quote unquote, being on the market. Yeah. And if a player like that is available on the market, if you do not sit down and have a discussion about how to acquire him, you're doing your team a disservice. Because if the Lions, let's say the Lions did that. So A6, pay attention, because I'm going to give you the deal one more time. You contact Lamar Jackson, things have to happen to make that a reality. And you say, if we trade for you, would you be willing to sign a 5-year, $275 million contract, $55 million a year on average, 100% guaranteed money. So you cannot get out of paying him that money. We are going to trade Jared Goff 3 to 4 first-round picks to acquire him. And then we are letting the players go that Mike highlighted on the 2023 salary cap. You have a team now that, with the coaching staff and this foundation and upgrading what he doesn't have in Baltimore right now, that you could see. Can you imagine what the Philadelphia game would look like if it wasn't Jared Goff under center, if it was Lamar Jackson forcing? Think of the mismatches that are on this team. You have Lamar Jackson, you would have Jamison Williams, you have Aman Ra St. Brown, and maybe new DeAndre Swift is certainly a matchup problem. Yep. Like, how are teams going to guard that?
Yeah.
That's my thinking. And then I could just get, instead of a Detroit Rams fan, I could become a Detroit Raven.
Right.
Or a Baltimore Lion, or however we want to combine the teams, right? Like, but I'm just saying, like, that is a series of dominoes that would have to fall, and it is unlikely that those would all fall in the way necessary for him to get onto the Detroit Lions. But the very fact that he only put out 3 teams,
and we were one of them,
is like, you now actually have to have that conversation if these dominoes start to fall in that way.
Oh, do you think Brad Holmes is already having that conversation with Sheila?
If I was Brad Holmes and Lamar Jackson, like, you certainly would have people who are paying attention to social media, like, for this exact reason. And he puts that out, I would certainly not in the press say, like, well, you know, we're always going to pay attention to what's going on in the NFL, and like a player like Lamar Jackson could help any team, you know, blah, blah, blah. You give him the BS line about how good everybody is and what your process is or whatever. Right. But behind closed doors, when you're talking about how to make this team better, if you are not entertaining that conversation, I think that you're you should really be examined as to whether or not, like, how are we going to make improvements?
You're doing a disservice.
Right. You're doing your team a disservice. And like, I understand, like, there are people out there that really believe in who Jared Goff is as a player. I just don't understand it.
Yeah.
I don't see what they see. Now, Jared Goff went to a Super Bowl. He lost that Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson won an MVP award. I don't know how you want to weigh those two things. But like,
I think it's also about everything else, right? It's not about, oh, well, he went to a Super Bowl. What was his part of it? Was he a game manager because he rode the coattails of Todd Gurley, who had one of the most prolific running?
Didn't play in that game? Yeah.
Was it on the coattails of the number one defense in the NFL? Or was it because, you know, he was the thing that made the whole team tick?
Right.
I don't think it was the third one.
No, I don't think so either.
Right. So, and I think that's the difference. Lamar, you know, winning the MVP, part of it is like, okay, it's a popularity contest.
Right.
Whatever.
You have a good narrative.
Right. But at the same time, you have to be effing good yourself. Like, you have to be really, really good. That's not a team thing. Right. Wins are a team stat. A Super Bowl is a team thing. You still have to be on a good team to get there and win it. It's not an individual stat. But getting things like Pro Bowls and MVPs, you have to be good.
You have to be good.
Regardless of the team around you.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's where I would kind of lead that conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of, I'm a big Red Wings fan, right?
Yeah.
Chris Draper has 4 Stanley Cup rings. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to put him and say, well, you know, he's got 4 Stanley Cup rings. Sidney Crosby, who's a generational talent, is half as good as him. No, because he only has 2, right? No, that's not the way that works.
Right.
Draper was a key part of what we did, but he was not Sergei Fedorov, right? He wasn't Yzerman. He wasn't Lidstrom. He wasn't Sidney Crosby or Alex Ovechkin. Like, he was a good role player, and he rode along with a really good team and got 4 rings because of it. And that's kind of the way that I see Jared Goff is one of those guys that could have gotten a ring, but not because of him.
Right.
Right. Just with him.
Mm-hmm.
So
the one last thing I'm going to say before we go for the evening is, well, thank you to everybody in chat for showing up. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
And then Aiden Hutchinson has 1 less sack than Kyle Hamilton has tackles so far this year. So put that in your pipe and smoke it through 2 weeks of the NFL season, all you Kyle Hamilton fans out there. Kyle Hamilton also has a blown coverage that led to one of those touchdowns that let the Miami Dolphins back into it. So for everybody who was like, this guy's not going to get beat deep, it took until the second week of the season to do it. So. Yeah. He's probably going to be a great player, but he's not right now.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's week 2. He's learning just like everybody else. But I think the lesson here is that's not what affects the game in a positive manner as much as most other positions.
Right.
Right.
100%. Mike, what's the email?
Email casualgmpodcast@gmail.com.
You guys still have the opportunity to be our very first email submission.
Right. Yes, do it.
So if you can hear my voice, send us an email with a question. We will read it on air.
Yeah. On YouTube, appreciate you guys watching the live stream, watching the video on demand. Share it with your friends. Say, hey, these guys are cool, preferably. They've got good ideas, preferably. Like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. When we get to 50 subs, Drewster is going to replace the Ravens hat with a Lions hat,
which you will get to vote on.
Yes, we will have a 50 sub Lion hat day. I don't know how we're going to do that or what we're going to do, but it will happen.
Voting is one of the things that makes our country as cool as it is, and we want to encourage that tradition by you picking my hat. So.
Right. All right, guys. Appreciate you all. Drew, is awesome to talk to you.
You too, Mike.
Let's get another dub next week. What do you think?
Oh, that would be, as I heard once described, the tits. So
the tits. Yes. Yeah.
Can't wait.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
See you, man.
All right. Bye.
Bye.